This is Securing Success, where we get to know the professionals that make up the cybersecurity sector. Today we're talking to Michael Plawner and Ari Billauer, the co-founders of RPS Consultants. Michael and Ari are taking their decades of customer success and post-sales experience at enterprise SaaS companies, and they're applying it to their newly minted consultancy. Guys, congrats on the first step.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
So I'm happy to have you on. I've known Michael for a while, getting to know Ari really well. And before we jump in to RPS and your journey, you guys are really customer success pros. You've been in the game a long time. Give people a perspective or an overview of what customer success is from your perspective and how it's evolved around the SaaS and ARR environments.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having us. Customer success is something that's evolved over the last, let's say, 7 to 10 years significantly as companies had transitioned from perpetual license to subscription services to take advantage of that lucrative and that evolving flywheel. And it really does mean a lot of different things to a lot of different companies. But in the end, bottom line, it's ensuring that customers are seeing the value of the product that they purchased and that they're coming back for more, so that you're able to take advantage of that ongoing annual recurring revenue and build upon the exponential growth.
So clearly, keeping annual recurring revenue coming in, ensuring renewals are taking place are important. But give more depth and understanding around why customer success is so critical today to enterprise SaaS organizations. I mean, the word customer success 10 years ago, I think people would be at pains to say that even existed at that point. So what's changed and why is it so critical today?
Sure. Well, I think it was truly that transition to subscription services in the SaaS market. In the past, customers, when companies sold a product, the perpetual license, there was kind of of course you wanted to have a good, a good brand reputation. You wanted to be able to make sure that those customers got value. So there were post-sales organizations that would do delivery, provide some support, but the real initial purchase was the real revenue generating mechanism for the company. And maybe there was this kind of maintenance, kind of a portion of a percentage of the purchase as an ongoing maintenance fee. And then they'd come back 4 or 5 years later and sell the upgrade or the new product or whatever it was. Taking advantage of the moving to a subscription service took a lower revenue up front, a lower price up front, but made that price consistent over time. Great for businesses because they could plan their budgets, and great for the company because now they had this ongoing and predictable revenue stream, the ARR, that they can then build upon each year with additional new sales. And that's really what changed and switched from the concept of you've got to do more than just deliver the product. You got to do more than just deliver the service and provide support around it. But you got to ensure that those customers that are paying a little bit less up front are coming back for more, that they're seeing the value, that they're taking advantage of it, and that they stick with your business and your company, and that you can start building upon that revenue for future growth. And also along with that, a lot of the services and the products started moving towards the cloud. So it was easier for companies to be able to provide an upgrade path to newer versions and newer features in their product. And that gave them a great community, a great customer base upon which they can provide additional products and services around that. So that was really a big change that happened about 7-10 years ago. And that changed the way companies were engaging with their customers. Unfortunately, it took longer for companies to make that transition. Because the people that were working in that field were more, delivery folks. They were perhaps services more transactional, whether it's a support engagement or a professional services engagement to deliver value. That whole concept of this kind of post-sales account manager was kind of a new discipline that evolved and came out. You had things like engagement managers or high-touch technical account managers, but this was more about helping drive usage of the product more than just making sure that it was working.
And I think a lot of what you're talking about can resonate to not just cybersecurity practitioners or enterprise SaaS practitioners, but everyone, because everything seems to be shifting towards a subscription model today. And I mean everything, right?
Yeah.
So when you put it in perspective of predictability when it comes to revenues, that makes a lot of sense. If you don't know if they're going to buy the product after their 5-year license expires, that might be a different conversation around forecasting and just general predictability around business. And so it makes a lot of sense why organizations are moving to that. You've explained it in a really clear way. But you also just mentioned that organizations have been late to the game. Maybe they're what today is considered customer success weren't adept enough to make those changes. So as organizations make the shift, are you seeing them make mistakes? Are there flaws in their process? I mean, is there anything that they're not doing right?
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead.
Michael, okay.
Please.
So, one of the things that we see is companies in general are hugely incentivized to develop their product and then sell their product. Right? Because that's what you got to do. That's your step 1 and 2. You need something to sell, and you got to go sell it. What happens after is a problem for most companies. So we see that you build up your product, you build up your services, and you start selling them really hard. And your sales team goes and gets them. They hunt. They do a great job. They close the deals, and everyone's really engaged. And that works pretty well when the company's small. But all of a sudden, you start getting these really bigger deals and bringing in more customers, and it gets really exciting. You realize, wait a minute, we've got to keep these customers. They're going to renew. How do we handle that? And a lot of companies, like Michael said, think this is sort of an afterthought, and it doesn't have to be. And then you end up with the situation where you're playing catch up. Right? We have the customers. How do we manage renewals? How do we track them? How do we incentivize the customers? How do we engage with them? And you find yourselves rapidly behind the 8 ball. Because again, justifiably so, you got to focus on developing your product. You got to focus on selling it. Because if you don't do that, you have no customers to deal with anyway. So that's really what you got to deal with first. And companies very much focus on that. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of error, a lot of missteps, but it's natural because there is this underlying importance to developing the product and selling it.
But it's so critical, right? Because at the end of the day, if you aren't keeping those customers you've worked so hard to develop, close, generate revenue from, you are not going to keep up with the competition from a perpetual licensing and ARR standpoint. And you guys are now sitting here as, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and to add to that, we've seen this so many times. We've gone to companies where they are literally victims of their own success. They've got an awesome product. They went out and they sold it like crazy, and then they're not able to engage after the sale with their the day after problem with their post-sales organization to be able to ensure that those customers get the value, and they start hitting double-digit churn. And now the excitement around the recurring revenue flywheel is suddenly hampered by this friction of churn. Like that's what I like to call it, the dark side of the flywheel. Like you think about, I get a new customer and boom, I could just pile them on top of my ongoing ARR, and they're super excited about that. But there's this huge break on it when customers are not seeing the value, and then they leave. Because look, large enterprise companies typically stick with the vendor for approximately 10 years. Small businesses are closer to 4 or 5, but large businesses, they stick with a company with a vendor for 10 years. So the moment that And I know that most companies are selling 1 year subscription, and maybe they've got a 3 year contract if they're lucky, but typically it's 1 or 2 years. But they do stick with them for 10 years. So if you churn after 1 year, that's 9 years of revenue that you just lost. There's this compound churn that is a result of not investing in that day after problem, not ensuring that those customers see the value. And if you take, your typical $100 million annual recurring revenue business, that's a significant impact. That compound churn after 3 years is costing you $4 million. After 5 years, that's close to $18 million. At 10 years out, the lifetime that you should have had those customers, you're losing almost $200 million of revenue. That's significant.
And
that's a huge slowdown. So we recognize that companies need to focus on winning new business and making sure that they've got a good product. And we put together, using our experience, our methodology, we recognize that there's this need for a cost-effective solution to ensure that they're prepared for the day after. And that's what we're doing with RPS.
So you mentioned, and this may have just been an example, you mentioned a typical 100 million ARR customer. Is that the customer that RPS is going to be servicing today, or who is your customer at this point in time?
So look, when I was talking about those numbers, that was a number that's impacted for a company driving 100 million in ARR, typical growth rate, just a 1% churn, because typically you're looking to keep your churn at not in excess of 7%. And that was just an example of what you hit, an 8%. But no, look, there are companies, we recognize that in all stages of the life cycle, it's better to set the foundations right from the start. So we speak with smaller startups, in their early stage that, they got some seed money. They're focusing on, again, their sales and building up their sales team, and they're focusing on building up their product and making sure that it can deliver. But we have a foundations program for those companies. Those are the ones that are sub 10 million in ARR. They've got maybe 3 or 5 kind of jack of all trades post-sales people that are, kind of support and kind of deliver in all of this, but they don't really have a lot of definition. And maybe they've got under 100 customers. So we have a program for them, because there's these CEOs, they've gone through it, they've seen the day after problem, and then when they get the reins of their own organization, they say, I don't want to make that mistake. So they want to set the foundations right from the start. So we have that program. We have the program for those companies that are a little bit larger, 10 to 15 people. They've identified, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm hitting 10
to 15
churn.
people in the post-sales program?
Yeah, 10
Michael?
to 15 people in the post-sales organization. Okay. Maybe they've got a couple hundred customers, and then we help them with the retention, drive retention. Or then they get larger and they're like, every new customer I take on, I need to hire another CSM. It gets a little bit more difficult, so we have a scale, and those are the companies that are in the 30 to 80 million in ARR. Maybe they've got a couple of thousand customers, and then larger. They've got the companies that are solid. They've got over 100 million in ARR. Their retention, their churn rate, their GRR is great. They're comfortable with that. They've got a global
what
customer
is GRR?
Success of post-sales. The gross retention rate. This is where they're ensuring that their customers are coming back. Their churn rates are low. Their retention's high. But they're not cultivating, because what you have is they've added new products. They've added new services. They move from product to platform. And what they aren't doing is they're not taking advantage of this large, satisfied customer base to be able to bring and drive even additional value, more value from the products and services that they have.
As a recap, it sounds like you've got a program that would fit the needs of customers from essentially seed stage, really early stage. Do they have to have a customer or customer base of some sort to make sense to bring you on board? Or do you come in and say, hey, we lay that foundations before you get your first customer. We tell you how to not mess up once you're able to land those first few customers, those first few very critical customers as that?
Ari, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I would applaud a company that does that. I think customer success is critical to a business. it's rare that companies are going to make that investment before their first sale. Look, if there are any companies out there who are interested, we're happy to talk to you. But most at that point are really focused on that sale, on getting their first wins, on getting their stake in the ground. I mean, companies that haven't yet made their first sale aren't even really solid on their product, right? Because your first few customers will be roadmap customers. They'll help you define what you're doing, and that's great, and that's the way it should be. But after you have a few sales under your belt, and you're starting to grow your customer base. At that point, you really should start to be thinking about how do we ensure renewal, how do we ensure satisfaction, how do we build shelfware, because all those are very real problems that companies face.
And explain to people what shelfware means.
Shelfware is a common phenomenon where people buy software, companies buy software, and then don't install it. It sits on the shelf. It sounds crazy, especially because companies will invest all this money into a product, and we see millions. We've seen this at incredibly large companies where they have a installation and rollout schedule, and you fit in somewhere your product or service that you sold may get installed in 6 to 8 months, 10 months, because that's when it fits into their installation cycle. So you've got to be on top of them. You've got to be communicating with them, ensuring that they understand you're still there, helping them, driving them, educating them so that when they do install your product, you're ready to go. There's a lot of challenge there to make sure you're driving a renewal when they buy a product and don't start using it for 8 to 10 months.
Right. And
so
to add
yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. To add to that is we've seen the other side of it, where we've seen the other side of that, where you have a very long time to value, where because the company hasn't scaled properly, because they don't have the right mechanisms in place to be able to let the post-sales organization know that they have landed a new deal, and they haven't properly managed or scheduled out their resources, that companies have to wait months until the vendor company, the SaaS provider, is ready to help provision and start them up. Because there's this thought, and we ran into it a lot, that if you're not in the post-sales organization, you're like, it's a SaaS product, it just gets provisioned, so it's just going to work out of the box. And a lot of products that do require some level of training and integration and setup and then just oversight to make sure, because again, on the customer side, the economic buyer is not necessarily the person who's actually using it, deploying it, and they might be very happy and satisfied with the product that they already have. So making sure that you're staying on top of that and driving towards a quick time to value avoids shelfware, which happens too commonly.
And I've got to imagine, right? I mean, you two both sound like you know what you're talking about. Michael, you and I have worked together. I know you know what you're talking about. But when you talk about keywords like time to value, rolling out, everything we just discussed, is there a playbook that you implement for each and every stage? Or do you have to come in and kind of take your knowledge and create a new playbook for each new customer, because every customer, I suspect, is different? How's that work? How are you planning to roll that out on your side?
I'll take that one. So first of all, having to roll out a custom playbook for every customer would be disastrous, incredibly costly. No, there is a way. There's a methodology. There is a plan to get to value, a plan to deal with these things. Of course, each plan has to be custom tailored and fit the company that it's going to, right? No consultancy, no one can come into a firm or a company and say, this is exactly what you have to do. The first thing you have to do is listen, right? We got to understand where you're at. You got to understand what your culture is. You got to understand what your product does. We got to understand what processes you have, what metrics you have in place. Understand really where they're coming from and really understand their pain. Before you open up your mouth and you open up your first word of advice, you got to listen. And once we've listened, once we've gathered the information, we've done our assessment, we can then do a gap analysis and say, hey, we see where you are, we see where you got to go, and we work with the company to take that gap analysis and turn it into an action plan that fits for them, that works in their culture, that works with their product. We work with their team to build this so that they can live it. Because any plan that comes from the outside, it's not going to land right. It's got to be homegrown to a certain extent, and we have to help them do that. I hope that answers the question.
It does, right? I'm sincerely curious. There's going to be so many different customers at so many different stages that you work with. I suspect based on the SaaS product that they're going to be selling and delivering, there's going to be nuances around what the challenges are, right? How easy is it to onboard? So that's why I asked the question. I do get what you're saying, but it sounds like there's a methodology, but there's flexibility in the methodology based on the customer's needs, which makes a whole lot of sense.
Look,
I'm super curious. Go ahead, Michael. I would like to hear what you guys say.
I'm having a little bit of an audio delay, Mark, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
There's we do have look. I think one of the key and critical things, like, of course, yes, we do have a methodology, we have approach, best practices are out there. The kinds of key performance indicators that you are measuring for a post-sales organization are universal, right? The churn, time to value, churn, retention, DPNR, and those are all there. You got to establish them whether or not the companies do or don't have them in place. And of course, when we leave, they are there. But it's the journey is what's so critical, because every company has its own culture and has its own nuance. If we came in there and just said, this is how you do it, it will be absolutely rejected. The key to success is taking the technical talent, the folks that know the domain that they've been working in, the product that they're working with, the target market that they are living in day to day, and educating them on the post-sales customer success discipline, the best practices around that, and then helping them through a series of workshops build up that customer success action plan to close those gaps in a way that makes sense for their business, for their culture. And if they build it themselves, and that's what they do, we help them build it themselves and make it their own, then we find adoption of those processes, those methodologies are guaranteed because they built it. And we just helped guide them.
So that it's a great segue, because I was curious about how an organization like RPS might be perceived by customer success executives today.
Sure.
Right? So are you seen as a threat? It's like, oh my God, we got to bring in the consultants, like that movie Office Space, they bring in consultants like, what do you do here? Right? So do they see it as a threat? But you somewhat addressed it. I'd love for you guys to expand on it more. You addressed it in saying we have you build it yourself. So I suspect there's still a need for that customer success executive, but give us some more details on that.
Yeah, no, we aren't a threat to the executives there. I mean, first of all, our engagement is limited and it's very clear on what we're there to do. And our approach starts fundamentally with enabling and empowering. That's what we're here to do. We're here to help them be successful in their role. Look, they've got the pressures of the day-to-day. They've got, the demands from their organization and probably from their customers. Like if they're at the retention stage, the problem with having a high churn rate, they're likely putting out fires on a regular basis. So here we come in as an external experienced team with post-sales knowledge and experience that we help bring and infuse into their organization. So no, we're not. We aren't doing. I know a couple of companies have asked, "Are you doing fractional customer success?" No, we're not. We're not doing that. We are there to help them be, because everybody does need a coach at some point in their career, and this is where we come in and help them as that facilitator. And what I found in my experience is that a lot of the folks that have worked on my team, that have, benefited from the experience and the knowledge that, Ari and I have brought to bear in multiple organizations, they've gone on to become executives in other organizations. They've come into leadership roles, and I hear the same thing over and over again. we didn't think this way, right? This isn't a way that I had thought before I started working with you guys. I definitely was excited about whether it was the cybersecurity, it was the broadcast television, or whatever it is that the industry and the domain that they were working in. They were super knowledgeable, subject matter experts. They knew exactly everything, lived and breathed that world. But they weren't thinking about the business outcomes of a post-sales organization, the metrics around it, the methodologies of getting there. They love it when I say, we're going to Fisher Price what we're doing here so we make it easy and repeatable, and they get excited about that. We didn't think about it in that way. And that's been so useful in my career, they tell me. And I've taken that with me. And you know what? It's always magical when I introduce it at another organization. It's just not a common belief. And we want to take that and bring that to executives and bring that to other folks to enlighten them on that as well, so that they get this own personal, professional satisfaction from their job of learning something new on top of something that they already knew and do something better with it. And also, of course, provide the benefit for the company to be able to drive up retention, growth, and do it at scale with good unit economics. And also for the benefit of those customers that are seeing the value of the products that they invested in.
Well, I'll tell you, it makes a lot of sense to me as a small business owner myself, as someone that's running his own practice. There's only so much you can do individually, and if you're not open to different ideas from different perspectives, from different people who know what they're doing, you're probably going to fail at some point. So again, Michael, thank you for this segue, because I wanted to ask you about now being small business owners yourself, right? That's something I'm fascinated by, right? You clearly know your business, customer success, post-sales, but this has got to be new for you, right? It's new for everybody who hasn't run a small business before. Now you're jumping into it. How's the experience been so far?
Well, look, I would say it's interesting because we're post-sales guys. So transitioning over to the sales world has been a little different. I've always had a tremendous respect for sales teams and what they do. You put yourself out there, and that's a challenge. And that's actually been really, I've enjoyed that bit of it, being able to meet with people, listening to the advice. We've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of great advisors. People have been so supportive, yourself included, Mark, appreciate that. Very supportive. The reaction, the response to what we're doing and what we bring to the market has been overwhelmingly positive. So that's been very reassuring. And then just in general, working together with Ari and being able to bring this to other organizations has just been, it's been something that we've been doing. And so in some sense, it's not all that much different than what we've been doing for the last 2 decades. It's just that we do need to layer on that sales bit in front. But because we know this so well, we've done this so many times, this is a problem that we've enjoyed and have to solve for different organizations in different ways a number of times. It feels very natural, and it's actually very exciting. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question as a small business owner, but there's a lot to it. Ari, you got a better answer than that.
Look, it's been well. First of all, it's a lot of work, which is not new. Like, we've always had long days, a lot of hours. It's just a lot of different work than we're used to doing. You really got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and get dirty and think about things that you haven't been dealing with before, which has been amazing. Like, it's just eye-opening how different parts of a company or different parts of a business work, and learning those things and being exposed to them has been fantastic. Meeting people, like we've spoken to, like Michael said, a lot of different advisors, a lot of different friends, professional advisors, and just even prospective clients and clients, learning their business, seeing how they work. That's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding, but it is a lot of work. Yeah, I think that would sum it up for me.
Michael, you focused on the sales side, which absolutely I can relate to, because if you're not selling, you don't have an opportunity to present your services and, quite frankly, make some money, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, as Ari was alluding to, it's not just sales. You need to be the marketing, the operator. You need to figure out the accounting component, the payroll. You need to understand what tools you might need to purchase for what you're doing. And there's just so much to it. There's so much work. And that is something that tends to surprise new entrants into leadership, business ownership, etc.
Sure.
So I've got to say, it sounds like you're getting it together at a really rapid clip, which I'm pretty excited about. Let's say somebody wants to start a new business and they see this and they say, well, they just did it. What advice do you give to other people who are jumping in? What consideration should they have before they make that leap? Anything that you've run into, that you've learned from, any sage advice to potential business owners and entrepreneurs?
So I'm going to give one piece of advice that I found really has been fantastic is find synergies with other organizations, with other groups, like we are doing with Pinpoint Search Group. If you're stronger, like we are independent organizations, we're not one large business, but we do engage and see the issues and challenges that companies have from a different perspective. And there's that opportunity to be able to bring in partners. So I think that would be definitely good advice. I think this has really been very beneficial. And also it's not just, talking about how challenging it is to, choose fonts or whatever it is, or put up a website. But the other benefit, because that's a good commiserating together on those challenges are good. But the other great thing is that you open up other opportunities and building. I don't love the word, but it works. Building synergies with other organizations in this kind of like virtual, company that you create by leveraging that larger network and building those partnerships.
What about you, Ari?
Ari?
Yeah, so for me, if I were giving someone advice, I would say two things. One is be prepared to work hard. It takes blood, sweat, and tears to do this. Is always something new, always something challenging, and really listen. Because no matter what service, no matter what product you're offering, you got to meet your customers where they are. You got to really hear what they're saying, really understand their business, really understand their pain, really understand their journey. And only then can you really make a meaningful change. Only then can you really bring true value. That's everyone has expertise in something, and they're eager to share it, myself included. We all know, we know our domain really well, and we're really excited to help other companies. But you got to listen first. You really got to hear where they're at, really understand where they're going.
You've outlined what RPS does. We've just talked about some of the challenges of small business ownership, especially ramping up a small business. My final inquiry to you: why are you doing this, guys? You're successful executives. I am positive you could go and work for another company in the customer success domain. Why are you putting yourself through this torture? What makes you want to do this?
Yeah, first of all, I calling it torture. It's incredibly rewarding. So that's first of all. It is really a lot of fun and rewarding to help other companies. And personally, I really like solving problems. That's what I do, right? Whether it's puzzles or whatever, solving problems is something that I really enjoy, and being able to leverage what we have done and help multiple companies solve these problems it's just very rewarding for me. It's something that definitely drives me. And if you're at one company, you're definitely getting it done. You're definitely helping them solve a problem. But being able to do this across multiple companies, across multiple stages of their life cycle, that's just so cool. One day you could be talking to a startup who's trying to get their foundations in place. Another day you're talking to a company that's trying to deal with unit economics. How do we keep all of our customers at all these different sizes at all these different price points? how do we make that work? How do we make it work well? And you meet so many cool people. That's it for me. It's super exciting, and it's scratches that itch of solving problems, of really making a difference and getting things done.
So for me,
What about you, Michael?
For me, it's three things that I could think of. First of all, I like to make a difference, and I look back at organizations where we have brought this to in my career, and they might not know why they are running their account review board or project review boards, whatever it is that they're doing, or what they're implementing that's working and that's making them successful. And it's a legacy that we have established. Like, we put that in place. We made that tick. And I check in on folks that I worked with 10, 15 years ago, and they're like, yeah, the stuff that you guys put in place, it's still there, and it's working, and it's making a difference for us. So I like that. So that's kind of rewarding on a professional sense. On a personal sense, it's like, as I described before, we're enabling and empowering individuals, and we're helping them grow in their own professional careers by bringing this knowledge and experience, sharing it with them, and allowing them to adopt it, make it theirs, and then make a difference in their business. And that's super rewarding as well. I think that we're having an impact on the people that we are working with. We're not putting them at risk. We're not making them worried or nervous about us. We're actually helping them. We're sharing what we've learned and sharing that with them so that they can do it and use it for the betterment of their own career, as well as, of course, their business, because that's what we were hired for. And then finally, and I'm sure Ari would have said this as well. Anyone who's seen Ari and I working together knows how we work together. We've been working together like this for so many years, and they're like ding and dong. And yes, we do. It's just a pleasure working with Ari every day. I can't do this without him, and I say that, and so I'm enjoying working together with my friend of more than 20 years in being able to bring this benefits to companies and to individuals. So that's what it's about. That's what makes me tick.
Ditto on that
sounds
last
like,
there you go.
it sounds like you two have a great mutual respect for each other. Personally, I think there's probably a huge benefit in you actually having worked together in the past, right? You're not trying to figure each other out. You know each other really well. I suspect there's a solid delineated division of labor that you've put together, and ultimately you're bringing your expertise. And like you said, it's not the Bobs coming in and trying to ask, what are you doing for the company? You're empowering the executives and the customers that you're working with to be successful. So I got to tell you, obviously, Michael, we've been friends a long time. We're going to stay friends. Ari, I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, seeing the success that both of you are going to have with RPS. And when you guys start taking over the world, we'll have to do this again. You guys will pump me up a little bit. All right, sound like a plan?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
It's great.
Cool.
Mark, really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks.
We'll do it again, and good luck, guys.
Thank you, Mark.